So I'm really excited to talk to this guy. And I want to get everybody up to speed on where you can follow Elex and also how you can watch his show. The issue is. So we'll make sure we get that, Kim. If it's unclear on any level, please make sure that we get it. Because I feel as though this is a piece of what Elex Michaelson can do, some of what you hear here. He has great access and great takes on things, and he's so great to come join us this Friday with some takes on politics and what's happening in the state of California. Elex Michaelson, everybody, from Fox in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you too, my friend. The issue is with Elex is you do it, it airs at different times in different places across California, right?
It does. So you can find the show and all the air times at theissueisshow.com. I also post it on my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Elex Michaelson. And we put it out as a podcast for people that prefer that if they're driving in the car. And you just search for The Issue Is wherever you get your podcasts.
Love it. We'll mention it again at the end of the show. Let me ask you about this Alabama ruling, the ruling against IVF. Now you see and hear certain members of the GOP. I'm talking about Congress people, senators. You even find it just in the world of punditry, sort of backpedaling from this or stepping away from it as even too extreme.
Trump just put something out about it in the last few minutes. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. That's the breaking news. We always had breaking news. Last week we had breaking news when we were on together. But
yes. So Trump, fill me in on what Trump said, and then tell me what you think the political repercussions
of he supports IVF and thinks that there should be legal protections in place in Alabama for IVF.
And will this kind of thing remind people of the Dobbs decision, of the rollback of Roe in such a way that it will matter in politics, or do people not need a reminder? Give me a sense of what the repercussions are moving forward.
I mean, how does it not remind people, right? This is the sort of thing that you probably wouldn't be talking about without that Dobbs decision. I mean, this is, obviously, it really affects a lot of people's lives in a very, very personal way. And IVF is such a meaningful thing for couples who can't get pregnant, and especially LGBTQ couples. That's maybe the only way that they're able to get pregnant. So, not just making this a crass political argument, but if we are going to take a moment and make it a crass political argument, it's a big win for the Democrats. Since this abortion issue has been brought up with the Dobbs decision in election after election around the country, when the issue is abortion rights, the Democrats have won. And that issue, even in red states, when it's just about that issue, voters have overwhelmingly chosen the idea of freedom of choice. It's not just Democrats having sex, like Republicans are having sex too. And a lot of them don't want to have babies that they don't want to have. And so there is nothing more personal than this issue, which is why it animates so many people. And clearly there's a lot of people on the right that have been animated by the abortion issue for such a long time, which is why this happened. And this sort of 50-year struggle by activists on the right to get to the point where they were able to overturn Roe v. Wade. But it is, of all of the issues on the table that the Biden administration would want to be talking about politically right now, abortion is number one.
I speak often of the rise of a Christian theocracy. I think this is fitting into the agenda items on such a theocracy. I think you see it in court decisions at the Supreme Court. I think you'll see it increasingly in legislatures across the country. It's a real threat to a country that I celebrate the secularism of the United States. And it makes me sad to see the infestation of biblical references in legal judgments and in legislative decision-making. But the justice who ruled that embryos are children appeared on a QAnon conspiracist show. This Alabama Chief Justice Tom Parker said on the show that he was a proponent of the Seven Mountains Mandate. That's an explicitly theocratic doctrine at the heart of Christian nationalism. You see in Alabama, I guess what I'm getting at, the essence of all of this on some level.
And it is a reminder as people vote. Obviously, Alabama elects their own judges, and that's its own thing. But one of the most important roles of the president is not only appointing Supreme Court justices, which we all see and hear, and who knows how many vacancies there'll be the next time around, but it's all the rest of the judges all over the country that interpret a lot of this law, is driven by the appointments of the president and the confirmations of the Senate. And so when you think about, what are voting issues that actually impact your life, who controls the federal judiciary in terms of actually determining what we do is one of the most important things. And especially now in a situation where our Congress is so dysfunctional and not able to do all that much, this is something that they can do. And right now, because you do have a Democratic president and a barely Democratic Senate, one of the only things they're able to do is they're able to get a lot of judges in. But so was Trump when he was working with Mitch McConnell. And the impact of that will all be felt for generations. I mean, these 3 justices that Donald Trump appointed to the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, they're probably going to be there for the next 30 years. So probably the most important part of his legacy long term is them.
I'm so glad you underscore this, because with an inability to actually get anything done at a legislative level, it is the courts that are making laws and making the culture, reshaping the culture in America. So I love that you talk about that. Let me ask you about something you've been so close to. I mean, you do so much in the way of politics, I think, across a really broad spectrum, but you moderated one of the debates, and you're really close to California politics in so many ways. What's happening? I've seen that Garvey has achieved maybe that position that he wanted. He wasn't going to get pole position, but he'd get, second car in the race type thing.
So we're talking about, of course, the California Senate race for U.S. Senate. The candidates we're looking at is Adam Schiff, who's so well known and looks like in every single poll he's been at number 1 with a little bit of distance. He has raised the most money, has the most endorsements, and it seems like he's checked a box to make it to the next stop. In California, the top 2 candidates advance after the primary, regardless of party. And so in every recent poll, it seems like there's a really close battle for second between Steve Garvey, the Republican, former Dodger, former Padre, and Katie Porter, the Democratic Congresswoman from Irvine, well known for her whiteboards and taking on corporate behemoths. Recently, the polls seem to be showing that Steve Garvey may started to have some distance with Katie Porter. There was a new poll that came out from PPIC late last night, which is largely seen as one of the most respected polls. It actually shows Porter up by a point, which is within the statistical margin of error, but essentially it's really close for second. Adam Schiff is doing everything he humanly can to try to lift up Steve Garvey's campaign, spending millions of dollars on multiple ads, trying to talk about Steve Garvey. Steve Garvey doesn't have enough money himself to run ads. So basically, the only way his message is getting out there is through Adam Schiff ads. There is now Adam Schiff super PACs disconnected from the campaign that are also running ads about Steve Garvey, and some Adam Schiff super PACs that are running negative ads about Katie Porter, which she says are not factual. And there have been some questions about how factual some of that stuff is. So the momentum seems to be going in Steve Garvey's way, but we'll see if Katie Porter is able to withstand that and see what her closing argument is. I'm interviewing her today for our political show, The Issue Is, and it'll be interesting to hear the way that she sees things. But it definitely feels like she's, sort of having to fight back attacks on a lot of different fronts right now.
Schiff and Porter then split Democrats and just in general, and I guess, left-leaning independents.
Yeah.
And Garvey gets what is then just a galvanized GOP vote. Is that how it kind of shakes out?
Right. And then there's also Barbara Lee in the race, too, who, is pulling maybe 10%, 9%. I think there's a strong argument that if Barbara Lee wasn't in the race, that Porter would probably be able to get a big chunk of that, and they may be able to box out Garvey. But if you're splitting it among 3, and then you have Garvey and he's able to just get all the Republicans behind him, there's a clear argument that he makes it. People think of California, of course, as this deep blue state, a state where Joe Biden won by 30 points, and it is. but there's also millions of Republicans here. And because our state is so big, there's actually more Republicans that live in California than live in any other state. And so if Garvey is able to secure 25, 30%, which is basically the amount of Republicans in the state, that could be enough to get him into the top 2. And Schiff thinks that there is no way that Steve Garvey is able to win a general election in California as a Republican, which is why he's working so hard to run against him. And it is unclear what would happen if he was running against Katie Porter. It's also unclear what Republicans would do in this state. Those millions of Republicans, if their only choice is Adam Schiff or Katie Porter, and then you've got, Pencil Neck, in their words, lying criminal who went after Donald Trump and tried to impeach him, or Katie Porter, the single mom feminist who's got a whiteboard going after corporate America and is Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas's protege. So that's not a great thing. You're like,
they can play the hits. News, always they'll play the hits. Right?
Watching, Republican in California, you don't necessarily find a home there. And so who do you vote for in that scenario? Could be really interesting and a real wild card if that turns out to be the race.
Yeah, something that came up as a California issue, just to all of these candidates to whom you've referred, is nuclear, nuclear power stations and nuclear plants, and you see, honestly, support for nuclear in many sectors of California, right? But from a political perspective, where do these candidates come down on this? They're really against nuclear energy. I'd seen, isn't that
Porter
at least
said
where
she's
they are
for nuclear fission energy, which she says is safer. Schiff is for the keeping Diablo Canyon, which is a nuclear power plant, online for now, but slowly bringing it off. It's an interesting issue because if you're really pro green technology, nuclear power is pretty green. It gives you a lot of power. And there's also innovations though in nuclear that may be different in changing the debate. People like Bill Gates actually funding some of this work to do nuclear in a cleaner way. A lot of these nuclear power plants are from like 40, 50 years ago, and they're using very old technology. So we're in a place where we need a lot of power in this state. And solar technology, wind technology, even that can be expensive and hard and not necessarily getting everything that you need. Is nuclear a solution? And in some ways it is splitting some of the traditional Democrats. Of course, there's that fear though, that what happens if there's an accident and then you have, a nuclear waste pouring in your state, and that still freaks a lot of people out, and maybe for good reason.
Yeah, you've got the Fukushima situation or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, and it also comes in the shadow of PG&E's report to investors that they had a huge quarter and a huge year over year. They're up 25% in terms of profits. That we touched on yesterday, and we got a blast from the chat of people talking about the fact that PG&E is just it's disrespected those who have no other choice, and it's been a blight on the life of so many Californians, particularly Northern Californians who deal with PG&E.
And you think about how many fires they've been responsible for because
killed
of
people.
their mismanagement of stuff, and then of course California taxpayers are so often on the hook of that, or all of the blackouts that happen because they can't take care of what they're doing. I think there are a lot of people in Southern California that celebrate the fact that PG&E doesn't offer service down here.
Let me get you to the Trump, Nikki Haley thing. We were talking about this just last hour. It seems a foregone conclusion that Trump will finish this up. And Kim was noting that Nikki Haley has said that she'll stay in the race. Give me your sense of this and evaluate these two people moving forward.
Yeah, we just had Nikki Haley on The Issue Is 2 weeks ago. So I sat down with her and had a long chat and got to observe what she's like in person. And that was interesting. I think, look, there are so many question marks about Donald Trump. I guess Nikki Haley is making the the bet that what happens if there's a health crisis with an overweight 70 plus man who doesn't exercise. His diet is made up of Diet Coke and McDonald's.
That said, by the way, those people never die. I'm telling you,
Oh,
you know.
I know. It's like him and Keith
We'll die
Richards will be
I'll
going
die on
forever.
an exercise machine. Trump will bury me. Right.
So there's that. There's the legal drama of what's going to happen with that. The business drama that now he owes all this money. So I think, the idea of maybe just hanging around and having the second most delegates in case something happens, maybe is her strategy. It doesn't look like she's going to be the VP at this point. Maybe she thinks if Trump loses, she gets to do an "I told you so" campaign for the Republican campaign the next time around. And as long as she's got donors that are giving her money, I mean, there's an old saying in politics that campaigns don't end, they just run out of money. And she hasn't run out of money. There is a sizable minority. It's not the majority. It's not enough to win the nomination, but there are millions of Republicans that don't like Donald Trump and that are worried that he's going to lose. And many of them are rich. It's the sort of country club Republicans that you think of, that like Ronald Reagan and Steve Garvey hung out with back in the 1980s, that are uncomfortable with this whole thing. And they're funding her and giving her money to keep this thing going. So, what else is she going to do? I mean, if she gets out of it, she loses most of her relevance. So I think that for a while, as long as she's got the money, I think she's going to keep going at least through Super Tuesday, which is March 5th, where California and so many other states are voting.
Well, she'll lose in her home state, but it almost doesn't, based on what you've just said, I'm thinking it almost doesn't really matter. You're saying that that's sort of baked in. We get it. But she's got money and she's got at least that much momentum. And even though she'll lose in South Carolina, it won't blunt that momentum in any way that's not anticipated. Is that a kind of a fair way to put it?
I think they've now baked into the equation that she's going to lose her home state. By the way, no nominee in this sort of scenario has ever lost their home state. So that's a pretty bad sign for actually winning or having a path. I mean, when I asked her on the show 2 weeks ago, what's the path to win? What state do you win to win? And she didn't name a single state. So that gives you a sense of sort of where they're thinking. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that, you've assessed it perfectly. I think that your notion that there's no traditional path to victory is a fair way to assess it. I just don't see it. Now, these are truly strange times politically, and something could happen, but it's a little bit of a slow-moving Hail Mary for her to hang in with this. So I want to ask you about what Biden has done with the failure of and I know we only have another minute or two, with the failure of the border policy to be voted on in the House, and essentially something coming out of the Senate that does have a lot of bipartisan aspects, has a very strong dose of GOP constricting essentially the ways in which you can get asylum into this country. So it's becoming a lot harder to get that. But that bill, really DOA. So Biden, through executive order, is trying to do things at the border. Give us a sense of what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's something else we're going to be talking about on the issue is this week. My colleague Bill Malugin, who's been there and reporting more than anybody else for years from the border. What's really interesting is that Bill has been doing his reporting this past week from the California border, because Texas has moved so aggressively with Greg Abbott on all these measures to try to basically do what the federal government isn't, with a lot of razor wire and very aggressive moves from the Texas National Guard to try to close up the border at Texas. So what you're seeing is that a lot of migrants now are moving from Texas to California, and places like Jacumba are seeing a rise of migrants. In California, we've seen in the last year a 500% increase in Chinese migrants. There's been a big, huge influx in the last month or so of people coming from China trying to get to California, which is a really interesting dynamic at play. And so, in some ways, Biden politically calling the bluff of the Republicans makes them own this issue a little more and takes some of it off of him. But at the end of the day, most voters are going to say he's the president. What did he do? And so you could see this, these executive actions, and whether they work or not, we'll see. But it seems like the move by Republicans to move a lot of these people into these so-called sanctuary states and sanctuary cities has changed the political dynamics of this. As you've seen a lot of these Democratic cities sort of overrun without the funds to take care of a lot of these people that are coming in. And the politics of this is starting to change from something that maybe was just covered on Fox News Channel to now that's being covered by some other, more mainstream traditional news outlets.
Yeah, those governors successfully, and the governors of those states that you're talking about, successfully brought the rest of the country into this conversation in ways, as you say, that transcend any kind of right-wing media.
And that a lot of people called out as, the governor of California called it out as using immigrants as political pawns and really found that incredibly disgusting and distressing to do that. But just from a raw politics perspective, it looks like it worked.
Yeah. I think that both are true. I mean, that they were used as political pawns and that there's a real problem. So I want to mention again here with our last minute, your shows. The Issue is a great weekly show. It's seen on different stations around California. And again, just go through again your social and where people can follow the great Elex Michaelson.
Thank you so much. So I'm on, if anybody's in Los Angeles, I anchor the Fox 11 News at 5, 6, and 10 p.m. every weeknight. We'll hope you join us for that. The Issue is our statewide show, airs on Fox 11 on Friday nights at 10:30 and airs across the state. You can go to theissueisshow.com for more airtimes or to watch the show. My YouTube page, youtube.com/Elex Michaelson. We put it out as a podcast, search for The Issue Is, and then find me in social media. My name's Elex with an E, so it's ELEX. On Twitter, there's an _, Michaelson, but the rest of it's just my name, Elex Michaelson. Would love to interact with you and join in this journey. And as you know, Mark, we've got to find different ways to get this information out in a lot of different places. So I've spent my time not only doing the TV stuff, but the Instagram clips and the TikToks and there's like so many ways to get stuff out. I know
you're making me feel awful about how I'm not, my footprint's not big enough. Here is Alex's stuff. You can see him on YouTube and his YouTube channel. Get on over there. I promised I'd get you out of here by 12:25. It's 12:24:29. I will see you soon. Elex Michaelson, everybody. Love you, pal. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Right. Have a great one.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.